She went into labor alone on Christmas Eve. The billionaire CEO stranger who held her hand through delivery had been praying for a family for 20 years. "I can't do this alone." "You're not alone. Look at me, Victoria. You're not alone. I'm right here, and you are the strongest person I've ever met. You can do this. I don't even know you." "Yes, you do." Those words, spoken between two complete strangers in a hospital delivery room on Christmas Eve, would become the foundation of a miracle neither of them saw coming. Have you ever wondered if some encounters are actually destiny disguised as coincidence? What if the most terrifying moment of your life was actually the answer to a prayer you didn't know you were praying? Stay with me, because what happened that night will challenge everything you thought you knew about family, love, and the mysterious ways our deepest prayers get answered. And if you've ever felt completely alone in your darkest hour, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now, because by the end of this, you'll understand why some moments are too powerful to be called accidents. The emergency room doors slid open with a mechanical whisper that barely registered above the chaos of Christmas Eve. Victoria cross-pressed one hand against her swollen belly and the other against the cold tile wall, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps that fogged the air in front of her face. The contractions were getting closer. Too close. She had counted 3 minutes between the last two, and the hospital was still 6 blocks away when her water broke in the back of the taxi, soaking through her dress and onto the cracked leather seat. This was not how it was supposed to happen. The plan had been simple, clear. Her sister Anna would fly in from Denver 2 days before her due date. They would wait together, watching Christmas movies and eating too many cookies, and when the time came, Anna would drive her to the hospital with plenty of time to spare. They would breathe through contractions together. Anna would hold her hand. She would not be alone. But the blizzard that hit Denver yesterday had other plans. Every flight grounded, every road impassable. And the baby, it seemed, had inherited her mother's stubbornness, because here they were, 3 days early, and Victoria was about to give birth in a hospital where she knew no one, where she had no one, where the weight of doing this alone was almost as crushing as the contraction that seized her body right there in the entrance. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice belonged to someone official, someone in scrubs, someone who could help. But when Victoria forced her eyes open, tears blurring her vision, the person standing before her was not wearing scrubs at all. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than 3 months of a rent, and his face held an expression of pure, undiluted concern that seemed almost foreign on features so carefully composed. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him screamed wealth and control and a life far removed from the chaos of emergency rooms. I'm. Another contraction seized her, stealing her words, stealing her breath, stealing everything but the white-hot reality of pain and panic. Her knees buckled. The floor rushed up to meet her. She thought about her baby, about how this could not be how her daughter entered the world, about how she had failed before they even began. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. "I've got you." The stranger's voice was steady despite the alarm in his eyes. "I've got you. Someone get a wheelchair. Now." His grip was firm but gentle, supporting her weight as if she weighed nothing, as if catching collapsing pregnant women in hospital lobbies was something he did every Tuesday. Victoria's fingers clutched at his expensive jacket, probably wrinkling the fabric beyond repair. But she could not make herself let go. "Someone get help, please." "Already done. Just breathe. Focus on breathing. Can you do that for me?" Victoria tried to nod, but another wave of pain crashed over her, and all she could do was grip tighter and try not to scream. Hospital staff materialized around them, like a carefully choreographed dance. A wheelchair appeared. Voices overlapped in urgent medical jargon that Victoria's panicked brain could not process. But through it all, the stranger stayed. His hand remained steady on her shoulder. His voice remained calm. "What's your name?" he asked as they began wheeling her toward the maternity ward. "Victoria. Victoria Cross. I'm alone. My sister was supposed to be here, but her flight got canceled in Denver. And I don't have anyone else, and I'm so scared." The words tumbled out in a rush, each one punctuated by gasping breaths. She did not know why she was telling this to a stranger. Did not know why it felt so desperately important that he understand she was not supposed to be alone. That this was not how she had planned it. That she was trying so hard to be strong, but she was terrified down to her bones. You're not alone. The words came out before he seemed to think them through. Before he could remember whatever carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. He moved with them down the corridor, keeping pace with the wheelchair, his hand still on her shoulder like an anchor. I'm here. My name is Maxwell. Maxwell Reed. And I'm not going anywhere. Victoria looked up at him through tears and pain, her brown eyes searching his face for something. Truth, perhaps, or trustworthiness, or simply someone who would not disappear the moment things got difficult. Whatever she saw, there must have been enough. Because her grip on his hand tightened as they pushed through the double doors into the maternity ward. You don't have to. You don't know me. You should. I know. But I'm staying. Maxwell Reed had not planned to be at St. Catherine's Hospital on Christmas Eve. He had planned to be on a flight to the Maldives, 30,000 feet above the world, far away from the empty penthouse that echoed with 20 years of silence and unanswered prayers. The tickets had been booked for months. First class, naturally. A resort that cost more per night than most people made in a month. White sand beaches and turquoise water, and enough distance from his life that maybe, just maybe, he could stop thinking about everything he did not have. But then his assistant had called yesterday afternoon, voice tight with pain, apologizing profusely for the emergency appendectomy that would require surgery tonight. And Maxwell had done what he always did. He had handled it, rearranged his schedule, canceled the Maldives, driven to the hospital to make sure Diane was comfortable and had everything she needed. That was who Maxwell Reed was now. The man who handled things. The man who solved problems. The man who signed checks and made decisions and kept the machinery of his billion-dollar empire running smoothly. He was not the man who held the hand of a terrified pregnant stranger. But here he was, following a wheelchair into a delivery room, his expensive suit jacket wrinkled from where she had gripped it, his carefully ordered evening plans completely derailed, and he could not seem to make himself leave. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him in that moment before she collapsed. The raw fear in her eyes. The vulnerability of someone facing their darkest moment completely alone. Or maybe it was something else. Something he did not want to examine too closely. Something that felt like the universe reaching down and grabbing him by the collar and saying, "Pay attention. This matters." How far apart are the contractions? The nurse's voice was brisk and professional as she checked Victoria's vitals in the delivery room. Her name tag read Sharon, and she moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. 2 minutes. Victoria managed between gasps. Maybe less. I can't. You're doing great, Maxwell heard himself say, though he had absolutely no idea if that was true. He had attended countless board meetings where billions of dollars hung in the balance, had negotiated mergers that required nerves of steel and perfect timing. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this raw, primal intensity. Just breathe. Focus on breathing. Are you the father? Sharon glanced between them with barely concealed curiosity. Christmas Eve in the emergency room had probably taught her not to make assumptions, but her eyes held the question anyway. No, he's my friend, Victoria said quickly, her eyes meeting Maxwell's with desperate gratitude. He's here for me. Sharon nodded, accepting this without further question, and continued her assessment. Maxwell felt something strange twist in his chest at those words. Friend? They were not friends. They were strangers who had met 7 minutes ago in a hospital lobby. But somehow, in the space of those 7 minutes, they had become something. Some configuration of human connection that did not have a name but felt real nonetheless. All right, Victoria. You're at 8 centimeters, the doctor announced, entering the room with an air of calm authority. His badge identified him as Dr. Yolanda, and his gray hair and steady hands suggested decades of experience. We're getting close. This baby wants to meet you tonight. Victoria's laugh was half sob. Of course they do. Couldn't wait for tomorrow like a normal Christmas baby. Determined, Maxwell said, surprising himself with a warmth in his voice. Like their mother. She looked at him then. Really looked at him, and for a moment, The pain and fear in her eyes gave way to something else. Wonder, perhaps, or recognition of the inexplicable bond forming between two strangers in the midst of extraordinary circumstances. "Tell me something," she said suddenly, squeezing his hand as another contraction built. "Tell me something about yourself. Something real. I need to focus on something besides the pain." Maxwell hesitated. He had become a master at deflecting personal questions, at keeping conversations safely in the realm of business and surface-level pleasantries. His life was built on carefully controlled information, measured responses, never revealing more than absolutely necessary. But something about this moment, about the vulnerability in her eyes and the strange intimacy of holding a stranger's hand while new life struggled to enter the world, made his usual defenses seem not just inappropriate, but impossible. "I was supposed to be a father," he said quietly. 20 years ago, I had it all planned out. The nursery was painted yellow because we wanted to be surprised. There were stuffed animals in tiny clothes and a mobile that played Brahms' lullaby. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened, though whether from another contraction or from the emotion in his voice, he could not tell. "What happened?" she whispered. "She died. My fiancée. 3 weeks before the wedding." The words still hurt after all these years, but differently now. Less like an open wound and more like an old scar that ached in certain weather. The kind of pain that had become so familiar it was almost a companion. "I packed everything away, donated the baby things to charity, told myself it was for the best, that I wasn't meant for that kind of life. But you never stopped wanting it. It was not a question." Victoria said it with such certainty that Maxwell felt something crack inside his chest. Some carefully maintained barrier between the man he had become and the man he had once hoped to be. "No," he admitted. "I never stopped wanting it." 20 years earlier, Maxwell Reed had been a different man. A man who believed in divine timing and perfect plans. A man who had knelt beside his fiancée in a small chapel and prayed for the family they would build together. Children laughing in sunlit rooms. Birthday cakes and scraped knees and bedtime stories. A home filled with the kind of love his own childhood had lacked. Isabel had been everything he was not. Warm where he was reserved. Spontaneous where he was calculated. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a way of seeing the best in people that made the world feel less harsh. When she had said yes to his awkward, nervous proposal, Maxwell had felt like he had won some cosmic lottery. He had not even known he was playing. They had painted the nursery together on a Sunday afternoon, getting more paint on each other than on the walls, laughing until their sides hurt. Yellow, because they wanted to be surprised, because Isabel said every baby deserved to come into a world full of sunshine. The mobile had been her idea. Brahms' lullaby. She had stood in the middle of the empty room, one hand on her still flat stomach, and hummed along with the melody, eyes closed, smiling at a future they both thought was guaranteed. "We're going to be so happy," she had whispered. "Our baby is going to be so loved." 3 weeks before their wedding, Isabel had complained of a headache. Just a small thing, nothing to worry about. She had taken aspirin and gone to lie down, and Maxwell had kissed her forehead and promised to bring her soup when he got home from work. He never saw her alive again. An aneurysm, the doctors said. Quick and painless, they promised, as if that could somehow make the loss less catastrophic. As if knowing she had not suffered could fill the crater her absence had created in his life. Maxwell had stopped praying after that. Stopped believing in plans or timing, or anything beyond what he could control through sheer force of will. He had poured himself into building Reed Technologies, transforming a modest software company into a billion-dollar empire. Success became his anesthetic. Ambition his only companion. He bought a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Filled it with expensive furniture and original artwork and everything money could buy. But he never bought a dining room table big enough for a family. Never put up pictures on the walls. Never made it feel like anything other than a very expensive hotel room where he occasionally slept. On quiet nights, the kind of nights when even work could not drown out the silence, he still felt the ache of that unanswered prayer. Still wondered what it would have felt like to hold his child for the first time, to hear them call him daddy, to build the life Isabel had dreamed about in that yellow nursery. But he had learned to bury those thoughts deep, to pretend they did not exist, to tell himself that some people were meant for family and some people were meant for success, and he had simply been sorted into the wrong category at birth. Before Victoria could respond to his confession, her whole body tensed with a contraction so powerful it stole her breath. "Doctor," Yolanda moved into position, calling out instructions that Maxwell barely heard over the rushing in his ears. "It's time," the doctor said. "Victoria, when the next contraction comes, I need you to push." "I can't," Victoria gasped, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. "I'm not ready. I can't do this alone." Maxwell moved closer, positioning himself where she could see him, where his presence could anchor her in this moment of terrifying transformation. He did not know what made him do it, did not know where the words came from, but they poured out of him with a certainty he had not felt in 20 years. "You're not alone," he said firmly. "Look at me, Victoria. You're not alone. I'm right here, and you are the strongest person I've ever met. You can do this." "I don't even know you," she sobbed. "Yes, you do." And somehow, impossibly, it was true. In the space of an hour, they had shared more honest vulnerability than most people managed in years. She knew about Isabel and the yellow nursery and the 20 years of silence. He knew about the absent father and the canceled flight and the choice to be a mother alone. They knew each other in the way that only matters, in the way of souls recognizing something essential in each other. "You know I'll keep my word. You know I won't leave. You know you can trust me. So, trust me now when I tell you, you can do this." What happened next would stay with Maxwell for the rest of his life. The raw, primal power of birth. The sounds Victoria made, animal and human and divine all at once. The way her hand crushed his with strength he did not know was possible. The doctor's calm commands cutting through the chaos. The nurse's encouraging words creating a rhythm of support. And through it all, his own voice, steady and sure, telling her she was brave, she was strong, she was doing everything right. "Good. That's good, Victoria. You're doing amazing. One more. Just one more." I can't. "You can. You are. I can see her. She's almost here. Just a little more." And then, the first cry. Thin and reedy and absolutely perfect. The sound of new life announcing itself to the world. The sound that had lived in Maxwell's imagination for 20 years, but that he had never thought he would actually hear. "It's a girl," Dr. Yolanda said, lifting the tiny, squirming infant. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Maxwell watched through blurred vision as they placed the baby on Victoria's chest. Watched the transformation on her face from exhaustion to wonder to a love so fierce and immediate it took his breath away. Watched the baby's tiny fingers curl and uncurl, searching for something to hold on to in this vast new world. "Hi, sweet girl," Victoria whispered, her voice breaking. "Hi, Noelle. I'm your mama, and I love you so much." Noelle, born on Christmas Eve, born into the arms of a mother who would love her fiercely despite whatever circumstances had left her alone on this night. Born into a world that had just become infinitely more miraculous. If this moment is giving you chills, hit that like button right now. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Because what happens next will restore your faith in the mysterious ways our prayers get answered. Maxwell stepped back, suddenly aware that he was intruding on something sacred. This was not his moment, not his family. He was just a stranger who had happened to be in the right place at the right time. A man whose canceled vacation plans had aligned with a woman's early labor in some cosmic coincidence that meant nothing beyond this night. But then Victoria looked up, her eyes finding his across the room, and something passed between them that was not gratitude or obligation or any simple emotion he could name. "Thank you," she said, and the gratitude in her voice went so much deeper than those simple words could convey. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for not leaving me alone." "It was my honor," Maxwell replied, and meant it with every fiber of his being. He should have left then, should have slipped away while the nurses cleaned up and Victoria began the work of learning to feed her daughter. Should have returned to his carefully ordered life, his silent penthouse, his world of quarterly reports and acquisition strategies. The crisis was over. The problem was solved. He had done his good deed for the year. But he could not make his feet move toward the door. Instead, He found himself in the hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning, drinking terrible coffee from a paper cup and trying to process what had just happened. His phone had been buzzing constantly. Messages from his assistant checking in. Updates from Tokyo about the merger deal. Urgent emails from investors who apparently could not wait until after Christmas to panic about quarterly projections. He ignored them all. For the first time in his adult life, Maxwell Reed sat in silence and let the world continue without him. Let the emails pile up unanswered. Let the deals wait. Let someone else handle the crisis of the moment. Because something had shifted inside him in that delivery room. Some tectonic plate of his carefully constructed life had moved, and he could not go back to pretending everything was the same. I thought I might find you here. Maxwell looked up to find Victoria standing in the doorway, moving carefully, wrapped in a hospital robe that was several sizes too big. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and exhaustion shadowed her eyes, but there was something luminous about her. Something that had not been there an hour ago. The glow of new motherhood, perhaps, or simply the relief of having survived. Should you be out of bed, he asked, standing quickly. Probably not, she admitted with a tired smile. But I couldn't sleep, and I needed to find you before you left. The nurses said you were still here. They sat at a small table by the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, coating the city in Christmas white. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed and the coffee maker gurgled, and two strangers who had shared something inexplicable tried to find words for what had passed between them. I need to explain, Victoria said finally, about why I was alone tonight. You're probably wondering. You don't owe me any explanations. I know, but I want to tell you anyway. She wrapped her hands around the cup of tea he had gotten her, drawing warmth from the ceramic. Her fingers were slender and capable, the nails cut short and practical. The hands of someone who worked with them, who built things and fixed things and made things better. Noelle's father isn't in the picture. He made that very clear when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready for kids. That this wasn't part of his plan. That I should take care of it if I wanted to keep seeing him. Maxwell felt anger flare hot and bright in his chest. The kind of protective rage that made him want to find this man and explain exactly what kind of coward walks away from the woman carrying his child. I chose her, Victoria continued, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. I chose her over him, over the life I thought I wanted, over the fear of doing this alone. My family, they try to be supportive, but they're far away. My parents retired to Arizona 3 years ago. My brother is stationed overseas with the military. And Anna, my sister, she really tried to be here. But the weather, you were so brave tonight, Maxwell said quietly. Not just physically, but you trusted me. A complete stranger. You have kind eyes, she said simply. And when you said you wouldn't leave, I believed you. I don't know why, but I believed you. She paused, studying his face in the harsh fluorescent light, seeing things he had spent 20 years trying to hide. The things you told me about your fiancé, about the nursery you never used. You didn't have to share that. I know. I haven't talked about Isabel in years. Haven't let myself think about what might have been. He met her gaze directly, and for once, he did not look away when someone tried to see past his defenses. But tonight, holding your hand while your daughter came into the world, it felt like answering a prayer I had given up on. Not the way I expected, not the way I planned. But maybe that's the point. Maybe prayers aren't supposed to be answered exactly how we imagine them. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I prayed tonight too. In the taxi, when I realized I wasn't going to make it to the hospital in time. When I thought I was going to have to do this completely alone. I prayed for someone to help me. And then the doors opened, and there you were. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of coincidence and providence hanging between them like snowflakes suspended in air. Outside, the city was waking up to Christmas morning. Families were gathering. Children were discovering presents under trees. The world was spinning on its axis the way it always did. But in this cafeteria, at this table, two people who had been strangers hours ago were discovering that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the fires of crisis. That sometimes we meet exactly who we need to meet exactly when we need to meet them. What do you do? Victoria asked finally. You never said. I run a technology company. Reed Technologies. Her eyes widened. The Reed Technologies? The one that just partnered with the UN on the Clean Water Initiative? Maxwell nodded, somewhat uncomfortable with the recognition. His company's recent humanitarian work had garnered more press attention than he had anticipated or wanted. He preferred to work behind the scenes. Let the results speak for themselves. Avoid the spotlight that came with being called a philanthropist. That's incredible, Victoria said, and there was genuine admiration in her voice. I read about that project. Using satellite data and artificial intelligence to find viable well locations in developing countries, you're literally saving lives. It's just business, Maxwell said automatically. The deflection so practiced it came out before he could stop it. No, it's not. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm, and it cut through his dismissal like a blade. You could have taken your brilliance and your money and done anything with it. Built another social media platform, created another app to help people waste time, made your billions and retired to some private island. But you chose to make something that matters. That's not just business, Maxwell. That's purpose. Something in her words, in the way she saw past his careful dismissals to the truth beneath, made Maxwell's chest tight. When had someone last looked at him like that? Seen him as more than his net worth or his business acumen or the carefully cultivated image of success? When had someone looked at what he built and understood why he built it? What about you? He asked, needing to shift the focus away from himself. What do you do when you're not having babies on Christmas Eve? She laughed, the sound surprising them both. A real laugh, full and genuine, that transformed her exhausted face into something beautiful. I'm a social worker. Family services. I help place kids in foster care, work with families in crisis, try to keep children safe and loved. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, to where Noelle had been just hours ago. It's why I knew. Why I was so sure about keeping her, even when everyone told me it would be too hard. Because I've seen what happens to unwanted children. I've held 5-year-olds who've been through 6 different homes. I've watched teenagers age out of the system with no one to call family. I wouldn't do that to her, even if it meant doing this alone. Maxwell felt something shift inside him, some fundamental understanding clicking into place. This woman, this stranger who had gripped his hand through the most transformative experience of both their lives, was not just brave, she was extraordinary. Someone who had devoted her life to protecting vulnerable children, who had chosen to become a mother on her own rather than give up her child, who had faced the terror of childbirth alone and come through it with grace and gratitude. Noelle is lucky, he said quietly, to have a mother like you. I hope so, Victoria whispered. I hope I can give her everything she deserves. You will. Maxwell surprised himself with his certainty, but as he said it, he knew it was true. He had known this woman for 4 hours, but he could already see who she was, could already see the kind of mother she would be, the kind of person who would sacrifice everything for the people she loved. Before she could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Cross, your daughter is awake and looking for you. Victoria stood carefully, wincing slightly, the reality of what her body had just been through evident in every movement. I should go, of course. But she paused at the doorway, turning back to face him. The fluorescent lights cast shadows under her eyes, highlighted the exhaustion in her face. But there was something else there too, something that looked like hope. Will you come see her? Before you leave? I know it's strange, but you were there when she took her first breath. I'd like you to meet her properly. Maxwell felt his careful defenses, those walls he had spent 20 years building, crumbling completely. I'd be honored. The maternity ward was quiet in the early Christmas morning hours. Most of the new mothers were sleeping, their babies nestled in clear plastic bassinets beside them, both exhausted from the work of bringing life into the world. The hallway lights had been dimmed to a soft glow. Somewhere down the corridor, a baby cried softly and then quieted. The whole floor seemed to be holding its breath, suspended in that magical space between night and day, between one year ending and another about to begin. But Victoria's room was awake with soft light and softer sounds, the gentle coos of a newborn, the whispered words of a mother learning her daughter's language. Come in, Victoria said when Maxwell knocked softly on the doorframe. Come meet Noelle. He approached slowly, reverently, as if entering a church. The baby was wrapped in a pink and white striped blanket, her tiny face just visible, her eyes closed in the peaceful sleep of the newly born. She was so small, so impossibly, heartbreakingly small. Maxwell had signed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, had shaken hands with world leaders and tech giants, had stood in boardrooms where the decisions made would affect thousands of lives. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of this 7-pound miracle. "Would you like to hold her?" Victoria asked. Maxwell's first instinct was to refuse. This was not his place, not his family. He did not know the first thing about holding a baby. What if he dropped her? What if he held her wrong and hurt her? What if? But something in Victoria's expression, an understanding that went beyond words, made him nod instead. She showed him how to support the head, cradling it in the crook of his elbow, how to bring the tiny body against his chest so the baby could hear his heartbeat, how to move slowly and confidently because babies could sense hesitation. And then Noelle was in his arms, warm and alive and perfect. Maxwell felt something he had not felt in 20 years, something he had buried so deep he thought it was dead. Hope, pure, uncomplicated, terrifying hope. The kind of hope that makes you vulnerable, that opens you up to loss and pain, and all the messy complications of caring about something more than yourself. "Hi, Noelle," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm Maxwell. I was here when you arrived. You gave us quite a scare, you know, insisting on being born tonight, but I suppose you knew exactly what you were doing." The baby stirred at his voice, her tiny mouth working in her sleep, making the smallest sounds. One impossibly small hand escaped the blanket, fingers curling and uncurling, reaching for something in her sleep. Without thinking, Maxwell offered his finger. Noelle's hand closed around it with surprising strength, holding on with the instinctive grip of new life, seeking connection. Her fingers were so tiny they did not even circle his finger completely, but the pressure was real, solid. A tiny human being holding on to him like he was something worth holding on to. And in that moment, holding a stranger's newborn daughter while snow fell outside and Christmas dawn approached, Maxwell Reed understood something he had been too afraid to acknowledge for 2 decades. Prayer was not about getting the life you had planned. It was about being open to the life that found you. Being present when moments of grace appeared in unexpected forms. Being willing to say yes to love, even, especially, when it did not look like anything you had imagined. "Victoria," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is going to sound strange. I know we just met, that you have every reason to think I'm crazy. But," he paused, looking down at the baby in his arms, at the miracle of new life that had appeared in his path on the night he had been trying to run away from his loneliness. "Would you let me be part of Noelle's life?" Victoria's eyes widened, but she did not speak, did not interrupt, just waited for him to find the words. "Not as. I'm not trying to replace her father or claim something I have no right to. But maybe as a friend. Someone who could be there for both of you. Someone who could." He stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was asking, what he was offering. "Why?" Victoria asked softly. "Why would you want that?" Maxwell looked down at the baby in his arms, at the way her chest rose and fell with each breath, at the perfection of her tiny fingernails and the delicate shell of her ear. "Because 20 years ago, I prayed for a family. And tonight, you let me be part of the most sacred moment of creating one. Because in 4 hours, you've shown me more grace and trust than I've experienced in 20 years of carefully controlled relationships." He paused, meeting Victoria's eyes over Noelle's sleeping form. "Because when I hold your daughter, I feel something I thought had died with Isabel. The capacity to love without fear. To open my heart to the possibility of being hurt because the alternative is being numb. Because I've spent 2 decades building an empire that means nothing if I have no one to share it with." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. "You're serious?" "Completely." He met her gaze steadily, letting her see all the vulnerability he usually kept locked away. "I understand if you need time to think about it. If you want to check me out, make sure I'm not some kind of—" "I trust you," Victoria interrupted. "I don't know why, but I trust you. The same way I trusted you tonight when you said you wouldn't leave." She wiped her eyes, and when she looked at him again, there was something fierce in her expression, Something protective and brave and a little bit terrified. Noelle is going to need people in her life who choose to be there. Who love her not because they have to, but because they want to. And you. I saw your face tonight. Maxwell. I saw how you looked at her. That's not obligation. That's something else. It is, Maxwell admitted. It's everything I've been running from for 20 years, catching up with me in the form of a 7-pound, 2-ounce miracle. Victoria laughed through her tears. She's only 7 pounds, actually. Even more miraculous. Then, they smiled at each other across the small room. Two people who had been strangers 12 hours ago and were somehow, impossibly, becoming something else. Not family in the traditional sense. Not yet, but the seed of it. The possibility of it. The beginning of a story neither of them had written, but both were willing to let unfold. There's something you should know, Victoria said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. About being part of her life. It's not going to be easy. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that's not exactly safe. I work long hours for not much money. There are going to be sleepless nights and dirty diapers and moments when I have no idea what I'm doing. She paused, looking down at her hands. And there's going to be judgment. People are going to ask questions. They're going to wonder why a billionaire CEO is spending time with a single mother and her baby. They're going to make assumptions. Let them, Maxwell said simply. I've spent 20 years caring what people think, building an image, maintaining a reputation, and all it's gotten me is a very expensive, very empty life. He looked down at Noelle, still sleeping peacefully in his arms, her hand still wrapped around his finger. This matters more than any of that. Victoria studied his face for a long moment, and Maxwell forced himself to hold still under her scrutiny, to let her see him completely, to not hide behind the masks he had spent 2 decades perfecting. Okay, she said finally. We can try. Start slow. See how it goes. Thank you, Maxwell said, and the gratitude in his voice surprised even him. Thank you for giving me this chance. Just, don't hurt her. Victoria's voice broke slightly. Please, Maxwell, whatever happens between us, whatever complications arise, don't hurt my daughter. I won't. He made the promise solemnly, understanding the weight of it. I'll be here for her for as long as you'll let me. The rest of Christmas morning passed in a blur of small moments that felt monumental. Maxwell held Noelle while Victoria dozed, exhausted from labor and the emotional weight of the night. He watched the baby's face as she slept, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the flutter of her eyelashes, the way her lips moved as if she was dreaming of milk. A nurse came in to check Victoria's vitals, and raised an eyebrow at finding a man in an expensive suit holding the baby with surprising competence, but she said nothing. Christmas Eve in the maternity ward had probably taught her that families came in all configurations. When Victoria woke, they talked. Really talked. Not the desperate, vulnerable sharing of the delivery room, but the slower, more careful conversation of two people trying to figure out what they were building. They exchanged phone numbers, made plans to meet for coffee later in the week, discussed logistics with a practical acknowledgement that good intentions meant nothing without follow-through. And through it all, Maxwell kept finding himself looking at Noelle. This tiny person who had entered the world just hours ago. This miracle who had somehow cracked open something in him he thought was sealed forever. I should probably let you rest, he said finally, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 6 in the morning. The sun would be rising soon. You've been through a lot tonight. Will you come back? Victoria asked, and there was vulnerability in the question. When you leave, will you actually come back? Or will you go home and realize this was just the emotion of the moment? I'll come back, Maxwell said firmly. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll set up that coffee date, and I'll be here, Victoria. I'm not going anywhere. Okay? She smiled, tired but genuine. Okay. Maxwell carefully transferred Noelle back to her mother, feeling the loss of her weight in his arms like a physical thing. He had held her for maybe 20 minutes total, but already his body had memorized the feel of her. The warmth, the trust. Merry Christmas, Victoria, he said softly. Merry Christmas, Maxwell. He walked out of the hospital into a world transformed by snow. The city was white and clean and beautiful in the way that only Christmas morning can be. His phone had died sometime during the night, So there were no messages, no emails, no demands on his attention. Just silence and snow, and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of hope. Maxwell Reed drove home through empty streets, and for the first time in 20 years, his penthouse did not feel like a mausoleum. It felt like a place he was leaving, a chapter closing, the beginning of something new. He should have gone to sleep, should have collapsed into bed and let his exhausted body rest. But he was too wired, too full of adrenaline and emotion and the strange, buzzing energy of someone whose entire life had just shifted on its axis. Instead, Maxwell sat at his desk and did something he had not done in 2 decades. He opened a drawer he never opened, pulled out a box he never looked at. And inside, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was a small stuffed elephant that Isabel had bought for their baby. Mr. Snuffles. That's what she had named it. Maxwell had laughed at the ridiculous name, and she had swatted him playfully, and said their baby would love it. Just wait and see. He held the elephant now, this relic from a life that never happened, and he did not feel the crushing grief he expected. Instead, he felt something like peace, like Isabel was somehow okay with this, like the prayer he had prayed in that chapel 20 years ago was finally being answered. Not in the way he had imagined, not with Isabel by his side and a child that shared his DNA, but with a woman who trusted him despite having every reason not to. With a baby who had gripped his finger like he was worth holding on to. With the possibility of becoming the father he had always wanted to be, just through a different door than he had expected. Maxwell made a decision in that moment. A decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. He was going to do this properly. Not halfway. Not when it was convenient. He was going to show up, be present, learn how to change diapers and warm bottles, and all the mundane, sacred work of caring for a child. He was going to earn Victoria's trust and Noelle's love. He was going to become the kind of man who deserved to be called family. And if you're wondering whether this is real, whether a stranger can really become family, drop a comment below. Because what happens next will show you that sometimes the family we choose is even stronger than the family we're born into. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is far from over. Maxwell called Victoria 3 days later, his palms sweating like a teenager asking someone to prom. They met at a small coffee shop near her apartment, neutral territory that felt safe and public. Victoria arrived with Noelle in a carrier, and Maxwell's heart did something complicated in his chest at the sight of them. Mother and daughter, a unit, a family he was asking permission to join. "Hi," Victoria said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Hi, how are you? How's she doing?" "We're good. Tired but good. She's eating well, sleeping in 2-hour stretches, which apparently is normal for newborns, though it feels like some kind of special torture designed to break me." Maxwell laughed. Can I hold her?" "Of course." Victoria lifted Noelle from the carrier with practiced ease that spoke to 3 days of intensive on-the-job training, and Maxwell marveled at how quickly she had adapted. How naturally she seemed to move through this role that terrified him. When Noelle was settled in his arms, something in Maxwell's chest settled too. Like finding a puzzle piece he did not know was missing. They talked for 2 hours. About practical things like her schedule and his flexibility. About deeper things like what they both wanted this relationship to look like. About fears and hopes and the strange territory they were navigating together. "I want to help," Maxwell said finally. "Not just emotionally, but practically. You said you live in a 1-bedroom apartment. That's not going to work long-term with a baby. Let me help you find something bigger, safer." Victoria's expression shuddered immediately. "I'm not a charity case, Maxwell. I know. I'm not trying to. That's not what I meant." He struggled to find the right words. Aware that he was navigating a minefield of pride and independence, and the complicated dynamics of a single mother accepting help from a wealthy man. "I just want Noelle to be safe, and you to have space to breathe. That's all." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her jaw tight with the tension of someone who had learned to rely only on herself. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But we're going to do this my way. At my pace. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not going to become dependent on you. I need to know I can take care of my daughter on my own." "I understand, and I respect that. I'm not trying to take over your life, Victoria. I just want to be part of it." She nodded, and some of the tension eased from her shoulders. Okay, then let's take it slow. You can come over a few times a week. Help with feedings, learn the ropes, and we'll see how it goes. That sounds perfect. And so began the strangest, most wonderful chapter of Maxwell Reed's life. He showed up, not just once or twice, but consistently. 3 times a week became 4, became almost daily. He learned to change diapers, fumbling at first with the tabs and the squirming baby, but eventually developing a competence that surprised them both. He learned to warm bottles to exactly the right temperature and to burp Noel without getting spit up on his expensive shirts. Though he failed at that last part more often than not. He learned that babies cry for reasons that have nothing to do with hunger or diapers or pain. Sometimes they just need to be held, to hear a heartbeat, to know they are not alone in the vast, overwhelming world. He learned that 2 a.m. feedings are simultaneously the most exhausting and most peaceful moments. The world is asleep except for you, and this tiny person who needs you. The quiet intimacy of being the only 2 people awake in the whole building. And he learned that love, real love, is not the dramatic, sweeping emotion he had imagined. It is showing up when you are tired. It is walking the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning. It is remembering to pick up more diapers on the way over. It is 1,000 small choices to be present, to be reliable, to be there. Victoria watched this transformation with a mixture of wonder and caution. She had been burned before, had trusted someone who promised to be there and then disappeared the moment things got hard. So, she watched Maxwell carefully, waiting for the moment he would get bored or overwhelmed or remember that he had a billion-dollar company to run. But the moment never came. Instead, Maxwell did something radical. He delegated, promoted his second-in-command to COO, and gave him actual authority to make decisions. Cut his meetings in half. Established boundaries around his time that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. His board was confused. His investors were concerned, but his company's performance did not suffer. In fact, it improved, because Maxwell, no longer trying to control every detail, had freed his team to do what he had hired them to do. And in the space that opened up, he discovered a life. Dinners with Victoria and Noel. Not fancy restaurants or carefully curated experiences, but takeout eaten off paper plates while Noel slept in her bouncer. Conversations that ranged from the profound to the ridiculous. Laughter that came easily and often. Slowly, carefully, the 3 of them became something. Not a traditional family. Victoria was always clear about that. She was Noel's mother. Maxwell was something else. A chosen uncle, a guardian angel, a man who loved this child with a fierceness that surprised everyone, including himself. But somewhere around month 3, when Maxwell was reading Goodnight Moon to Noel for the dozenth time, and Victoria was watching from the kitchen with a soft smile on her face, something shifted. "You're good at this," Victoria said when he had put Noel down for her nap. "Being a parent, I have a good teacher," Maxwell replied. But they both knew it was more than that. There was a moment, a beat of possibility hanging in the air. Victoria took a step closer. Maxwell's breath caught, and then she was kissing him, soft and tentative and full of hope. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's eyes were bright with tears. "I didn't think I could do this again," she whispered. "Trust someone. Let someone in. But you've been so patient. So present. And I love you," Maxwell said simply. "I love you. And I love Noel, and I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." "I will," Victoria said, and kissed him again. They took it slow. Not because they were unsure, but because they both understood that what they were building was too important to rush. They dated while co-parenting, stealing moments alone when Noel was napping, learning each other in the careful way of people who had both been hurt before. Maxwell met Victoria's family via video call. Her parents in Arizona, who were skeptical at first but gradually warmed when they saw how he was with Noel. Her sister Anna, who flew out finally, 4 months late, and grilled Maxwell over coffee while Victoria was at work. "Are you for real?" Anna asked bluntly. "Because my sister has been through enough. If you're going to bail, do it now before Noel gets old enough to remember you." "I'm not going anywhere," Maxwell said firmly. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it." Anna studied him with the protective ferocity of a sister who had watched Victoria cry herself to sleep too many times. Okay, but I'm watching you. Fair enough. Victoria introduced Maxwell to her world slowly. Her co-workers at Family Services who were initially shocked that she was dating a billionaire, but who gradually accepted him when they saw he didn't put on airs. The moms from her prenatal class who had supported her through the pregnancy and who grilled Maxwell with questions disguised as small talk. And Maxwell introduced Victoria to his world. The charity galas and business dinners that had once been obligatory torture became bearable, even enjoyable, when he had Victoria by his side. She wore simple dresses that cost a fraction of what the other women wore and somehow looked more elegant than all of them. She asked intelligent questions and listened carefully and treated everyone from the mayor to the coat check attendant with the same genuine respect. His colleagues were baffled. His friends, the few he had, were delighted. Marcus, the college roommate whose wedding had started all of this, called Maxwell one evening and laughed so hard he nearly choked. "I told you," he said. "I told you at my wedding that you needed to try this thing called fun. And now look at you, dating a social worker and changing diapers." College Maxwell would be so proud. College Maxwell would be terrified. Current Maxwell admitted, but also, happier than I've been in 20 years. That's what love does, my friend. It terrifies you and completes you all at once. When Noelle was 6 months old, Maxwell asked Victoria and her daughter to move in with him. Not the penthouse. That sterile, beautiful space that had never felt like home. But a house. An actual house with a yard and a playroom, and a nursery that he and Victoria painted together. Yellow, because that felt right. Because it honored what he had lost while celebrating what he had found. They hung the Brahms Lullaby mobile over Noelle's crib, and Victoria held Maxwell's hand as it played, understanding without words what this meant to him. "She would have loved you," Maxwell said quietly. "Isabel, she would have loved you and thought this was perfect. I wish I could have met her," Victoria replied. "She must have been incredible to inspire so much love." "She was. But so are you. And I'm learning that the heart has infinite capacity. That loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for her. It just expands everything." They made love that night in their new house, in their new life, with their daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall. And it felt like a beginning. Like everything that had come before was prologue to this moment. Noelle's first birthday fell on Christmas Eve, 1 year exactly from the night she was born. They threw a small party. Victoria's family flew in. Maxwell's assistant Diane came with her husband. Marcus and his wife brought their new baby. The house was full of laughter and wrapping paper, and the cheerful chaos of too many people in not quite enough space. But as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Maxwell found himself standing in the kitchen with Victoria, watching Noelle demolish her first birthday cake with the single-minded determination of someone who has just discovered sugar. "Look at her," Victoria said, laughing as Noelle smeared frosting in her hair. "She's going to need a bath." "I'll do it," Maxwell said. "You sit. Relax. You've been on your feet all day." "We both have." "I know. But I want to." He scooped up the frosting-covered baby, and Noelle squealed with delight, grabbing onto his shirt with sticky fingers and leaving handprints on his expensive sweater. Maxwell did not care. In the bathroom, he filled the small tub with warm water and carefully washed Noelle's hair, singing off-key versions of Christmas carols that made her giggle. She splashed him thoroughly, soaking his shirt, and he found himself laughing harder than he had in years. "What would you say if you could talk right now, Daddy? What would make you so happy?" "Daddy." The word still made his chest tight every time Noelle said it. She had started saying it 3 months ago, unprompted, just suddenly decided that Maxwell was Daddy, and that was that. Victoria had cried. Maxwell had cried. They had all cried, really, at the simple miracle of a child claiming her family. Later, after Noelle was asleep in her yellow room with the Brahms mobile playing softly, Maxwell found Victoria on the couch, staring at the Christmas tree they had decorated together. She looked tired but content, wearing the soft sweater he had bought her and the fuzzy socks that Noelle had picked out with help. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "About a year ago. About how terrified I was. How alone I felt." Victoria leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I prayed in that taxi, you know. I prayed for help. for someone to be there. And then you were. I prayed too, Maxwell said. 20 years ago. For a family. For a chance to be a father. And I thought the prayer went unanswered. But it didn't. It was just answered in a way I never could have imagined. Victoria turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. Are you happy? She asked. Really happy? Because sometimes I worry that you gave up too much. That this life is too small for someone who used to run a company. Who used to. This life is everything. Maxwell interrupted gently. You are everything. Noelle is everything. And I didn't give up anything that mattered. I just finally figured out what actually does matter. He took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. I've been thinking, he said, about us, about what we're building, about making it official. Victoria's breath caught. Maxwell reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He had been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. And here, on the anniversary of the night that changed everything, it felt perfect. Victoria Cross. He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring. Will you marry me? Will you let me be Noelle's father officially? Will you build this life with me? This beautiful, messy, perfect life that neither of us planned, but both of us deserve. Yes? Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face. Yes to all of it. They kissed while the Christmas tree lights twinkled and carols played softly from the speaker. And Maxwell Reed, who had spent 20 years believing his prayers went unanswered, understood at last that some prayers are answered in ways more beautiful than we could ever imagine. Sometimes grace arrives, wearing a stranger's face. Sometimes families are built not from blood, but from presence and choice, and showing up every single day. Sometimes, the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected moments. And sometimes, on a Christmas Eve when the world seems coldest and loneliest, love finds a way in. Not because we deserve it, not because we planned for it, but because we were brave enough to stay open to the possibility, brave enough to trust a stranger, brave enough to say yes when grace knocked on the door. 3 years later, Maxwell and Victoria stood in the same hospital where Noelle was born. But this time, Victoria was not alone. This time, Maxwell was beside her, holding her hand, breathing through contractions with her, being everything she needed him to be. And when their son was born, when the doctor placed the squirming, crying infant in Maxwell's arms, he looked down at this new life and felt the circle complete. It's a boy, the doctor announced. Victoria laughed through her tears. Merry Christmas, Maxwell. Merry Christmas, love. In the waiting room, Noelle sat with her Aunt Anna, coloring a picture for her new baby brother. She was 4 now, confident and bright and full of joy. She did not remember a time before Maxwell. Did not know that families could be anything other than chosen and cherished and built on love. When they brought the baby out to meet her, Noelle's eyes went wide. That's my brother? That's your brother, Maxwell confirmed. His name is Liam, and he's very lucky to have a big sister like you. I'll teach him everything, Noelle said seriously, about pirates and superheroes and how to not eat vegetables when mommy isn't looking. Victoria laughed. Great, that's exactly what I wanted. But as Maxwell watched Noelle gently touch her baby brother's hand, as he felt the weight of his newborn son in his arms and saw the love in Victoria's eyes, he thought about that prayer from 25 years ago, about the yellow nursery that never got used, about Isabel and the life they never got to live. And he understood that some prayers are not denied. They are just delayed, transformed, answered in ways that require us to grow into the people who can receive them. He had prayed for a family, and now he had one. Not the family he imagined, but the family he needed. The family that needed him. Thank you, he whispered. Not sure if he was talking to God, or to Isabel, or to Victoria, or to the universe itself. Thank you for not giving up on me. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that prayers are answered in the most unexpected ways, I need you to do something for me right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's lost hope. Someone who thinks they've missed their chance. Someone who's walking through their darkest moment and can't see the light yet. Because sometimes we need to be reminded that it's never too late. That families come in all forms. That love can find us in the most unexpected places. That showing up and being present is the most powerful thing we can do. Subscribe to Tales and Whispers with Dr. Langford for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective. And remember, the most important moments of your life might be waiting for you in the most unexpected places. In a hospital lobby on Christmas Eve, in a stranger's kind eyes, in the choice to stay when everything tells you to run. Grace arrives when we least expect it. Love finds a way in when we're brave enough to open the door. And sometimes, the family we choose becomes the answer to prayers we stopped believing would ever be answered. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep your hearts open to the magic of second chances, the power of presence, and the beautiful, unexpected ways our stories unfold. Because in the end, success isn't measured by what we build. It's measured by who we become. And Maxwell Reed finally became the man he was always meant to be. A father, a husband, a man who understood that the greatest treasure is not found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the small hands that reach for you in the dark, in the voice that calls you daddy, in the woman who trusted you when she had every reason not to. That's where the real magic lives. In the choosing, in the showing up, in the staying. Keep believing, keep hoping, keep your heart open. Until next time.